Welcome to the North Texas Teen Book Festival and the All in the Family panel, where that's right, you are part of our family. My name is Stacy. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'm a reader, writer, youth librarian, and a member of the North Texas Teen Book Festival Steering Committee. Before we begin, let me go over just one little thing. If you were on social media, we ask that you use the hashtag NTTBF21 and post as you will on that. Now, is everybody ready to start? We ready? Okay.
Yes.
We are going to start with Christine Day. Christine, can you just introduce yourself, your book for us? We would love to hear more.
Of course. Hello, I'm Christine. I am the author of The Sea in Winter, which is a middle grade novel about a young girl named Maisie, who is a serious ballet student. But when her story begins, she is recovering from a knee injury that has taken her out of her studio and has brought her away from her ballet friends for several months by the time the story begins. And it's essentially about her recovering and healing, and how her friends and family especially help her do that with a midwinter road trip. So that's The Sea in Winter, and that's me. I'm so excited for this conversation. Thanks.
It's a beautiful cover.
Thank you.
Gordon, you're next.
Oh, good. Wow. It's not the same order on my screen. So I am absolutely thrilled to be here. My name is Gordon Corman. I'm the author of many books, especially War Stories, which is a World War II book, focusing on three generations of a family. A 12-year-old Trevor, his father, and his great-grandfather, who is a D-Day veteran. When his great-grandfather is invited back to Europe to be honored for a town that he helped to liberate in 1944, he brings his grandson and great-grandson with him. Let's see. Well, I hope everybody enjoys it. It is definitely both an anti-war and a book celebrating the achievements of that generation that fought World War II. And it is told in alternating chapters of the family's trip today and the journey of Jacob Firestone, the great-grandfather, when he lied about his age to volunteer in 1944.
Ooh, and I can't wait to discuss that one further. Donna, you're next.
Hi, book friends. So this is the book. I'm Donna Gephardt, and the book I'm going to show you is my 8th novel, but it took me 17 years to figure out how to write this one. I've been struggling with it for that long. And I'm so excited because about 10 minutes before this started, a box came from UPS, and it was my brand new copies of the book. So here, I'm able to show you. It's Abby, Tried and True, and I've kind of been smelling it because I'm so excited that it just came. And Abby, Tried and True is about an introverted girl named Abby, and you can see by the palm trees there, she lives in South Florida. And Abby thinks the worst thing that could possibly have happened to her happened when her best friend and next door neighbor moved from South Florida to Israel, where her mom got a job. And she didn't know how she was going to start 7th grade by herself without her best friend because she's so quiet and introverted. But it's not the worst thing that could happen, because her beloved older wannabe-a-comedian brother is diagnosed with testicular cancer. So Abby and her 2 amazing moms have to figure out how to pull together and get her brother Paul through surgery and treatment for cancer. She's Jewish, so like her whole extended Jewish family helps and is involved, and it's wonderful. But I always try to put humor in my books and hope and lightness. So the person who moves in next door, where her best friend moved out from, an 8th grade boy named Conrad, and they start to like each other and explore that. So that's Abby, Tried and True.
Oh, I look forward to that one. And Jenny.
Oh my goodness. So I feel like Gordon and I are like connected somehow, because my father actually ran away from home and joined up for World War II also. He joined the Navy, and I have a picture of him in my book. He was part of the inspiration for my new book, The Lion of Mars. So The Lion of Mars it takes place in the future in 2091. It's about a boy named Bell who's living in the American settlement on Mars, and they live underground, and he lives there with a bunch of other kids and some grown-ups and a really cute cat named Leo. And he's a pretty curious kid. He's, you know, he's like all you guys. He wonders about the world, he wonders about Earth, but mostly he's very curious about the other countries on Mars, because there are other settlements like the French settlement and the Finnish settlement and the Russian settlement, but the American kids are not allowed to visit them. So the big mystery of the book is, why are the American kids not allowed to go to the other settlements? So you'll have to read the book to find out. And it feels pretty timely because we, the Americans, just landed a new rover on Mars. Percy, AKA Perseverance rover, just landed on Mars last week. So woohoo, go Mars.
I love the title and the cover of your book as well.
Thank you.
Okay, let's dig deeper. I'm going to ask, this question is for everybody. The title of our panel is All in the Family. Now, whether that means a found family, you know, your natural family, a combined family, or just a found family, can you talk about families in your books and how they work in your story and those dynamics? And we're going to start with Jenny.
So in the line of Mars, Bell's family on Mars is different from Earth. So the way that the settlement runs, the way the family runs on Mars, is that they're the original settlers who are all adults. There are about 6 of them. And then the children were all brought to Mars as orphans, as babies. And so they're kind of raised collectively as a group. And as the book goes on, Bell's really curious about this because it's the only family he's ever known. And he's really interested in Earth animals. And he learns that lions on Earth, they live in family units really called prides. And one thing he learns about prides is that lions who don't live in prides usually don't survive very long. So he starts to think of their family on Mars as a little pride.
Oh, I love that. Donna?
I think when I write a book, the family structure is so important to me. I spend so much time thinking about, what are the characters' parents like? What are their jobs? Like, how much money do they have? Where do they live? All those kind of things, even the grandparents. And even though a lot of that might not end up in the book, it's so important because think about you with your family. You know, it really matters who the different people are in your family and what is your role or place in the family. So in Abby Tried and True, Abby's quiet. She's an introvert, and her older brother is very extroverted, and he's funny, and he has a lot of friends. But when he gets sick, he gets very withdrawn. And Abby sort of needs to step into almost his role in the family to try to help bring him out of his sadness. And there's a scene where they're in the hospital and she's visiting with him, and her one mom goes down to the cafeteria and something really scary happens, and Abby needs to find her voice and she needs to speak up. So it's so interesting to me, the dynamics of families and where you find yourself within that dynamic.
Yeah, it's Gordon, you've got an interesting dynamic too. You've got 3 generations.
3 generations, skipping one. I probably would have just gone kid, father, grandfather if the time worked out. Right now with World War II, it just didn't. I couldn't kind of make the numbers work, so I went with a kid, his father, and great grandfather and grandfather. I think one of the first things I sort of realized tackling World War II. I'm a big fan of Marvel movies, but to criticize about those superhero movies, it becomes almost corny, because they're always like saving the world. It's always, the entire future of humanity is at stake. Let's save the world. And World War II, they really did do that, right? It literally was something from a Marvel script, right? The forces of evil were about to take over the world, and the good guys basically all banded together and stopped them. And I think the family dynamic in war stories is where people are kind of on the sort of, not really pro-war, because no one's pro-war, but World War II as the good war. This had to be done. Trevor's dad is very much an anti-war guy. Trevor himself plays a lot of video games. He's obsessed with World War II. And to him, it really is like a cool kind of video game movie kind of perception of World War II. And of course, the great grandfather, who is the guy who has seen it and participated in it, the real war hero, he has a much more sort of nuanced, complicated relationship with it. I mean, he tells the best stories. He is a natural storyteller, but at the same time, he's been through an awful lot. And there is a secret that he has, a dark secret that he has never fully revealed. And the trip that they take, retracing his journey through the Second World War, is what finally gets him to a place where he can reveal the truth of something that happened to him in 1944 as part of his World War II experience.
I really appreciate the nuances of the war and the different perspectives brought out in the book. And we're going to get back in just a little bit about the video game piece too. Okay.
Great.
And then Christine, you.
So I had a couple of like specific goals in mind when I was crafting this family for this book. One was that I really wanted to show, just like with my first book, a contemporary Native family, because there are still so few books with contemporary Native American rep in children's literature and in literature more broadly. And so as a Native woman, as an Upper Skagit woman, that was very important to me, and to make it also really specific to the Coast Salish region where I'm from, which is the Pacific Northwest, like Western Washington state. So that was one part. Another part was that I wanted this to be a family that has experienced tragedy but was not defined by it and overcame it. So my main character, Maisie, when she was a baby, her father passed away, and he was also actually a veteran, and in this, since it's a contemporary timeline, he passed away in Afghanistan. So that I wanted to show the resilience and the love of Native families. Another thing I really wanted to do was I wanted to show a really like happy, functional, healthy, blended family. So her stepdad, Jack, is one of my favorite characters, because I just think that step parents are so amazing. For someone to step into this role of becoming a parent, at whatever point in that child's life that you enter, and you sort of take on that role from there on. I think that it's such an amazing thing. And all the step parents that I have known in real life are just incredible people. And I think that very often in kids' books, we see step parents as a sort of source of conflict and strife more often than not, as like someone who has sort of like invaded this family, or is like a piece that doesn't quite fit right yet. And I wanted to create a book that was totally the opposite of that. And Jack is so clearly like a really invested father. And for him, like there's no real difference between Maisie, his like stepdaughter, and his son, Connor, who is like her little brother. So yeah, those were the three things that I really had in mind when I was creating this family.
Well, as a Native American myself, Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, I really appreciate your stories, and for the youth of the world and for the Native children out there. Okay, so I have a very specific question for you, Christine. We're going to come back to you. Your book is set in present day Seattle, right? And can you tell us how that setting is weaved into Maisie's identity? And how that and their road trip plays into that?
Yeah, for sure. So yes, it lives in Seattle, and that's another thing, is that most Native kids also live in big cities like this, in sort of urban and suburban areas. And so that's another thing I really wanted to show. But the majority of the book does take place during this road trip where she and her family, her mother is from the Makah Nation, which is basically like an ocean-faring kind of tribe right on the like top part of the Washington State coast. And then one of the neighboring tribes on the Olympic Peninsula is the Lower Elwha Clallam tribe, and that's where Jack is from. And so I really wanted this Midwinter road trip to sort of, even though these places are very, very close together, like Seattle to, it's like it's a day trip, less essentially to get to these places, but these are still actually like unique tribes that had, their own languages and their kind of own, relationships with each other throughout history. And so I really wanted to kind of show that and honor that, and talk like some of the like chapter titles actually have like the native names for like where we now think of as Port Angeles, this like port city in the north. I used the Elwha Clallam name for that essentially, which was a village that archaeologists have found artifacts in that area that date back to like around the same time that ancient Rome was founded. And so these are like really ancient, really powerful societies. And I used Chiwitzen as a chapter title to sort of bring that in. And we take her to other places that are sort of significant in terms of not just deep histories like that, but also more recent Native activism. Like the Elwha River is actually the site of the largest dam removal in the world. So there were these two huge hydroelectric dams that actually weren't really powering anything, which was part of the reason why it was easier to remove those ones, because they were just like these giant concrete blocks blocking up the river, and had been there for about a century before they were demolished in like 2011, which is a really recent, it was like 2011 and 2014, these two dams were kind of obliterated and the river has come roaring back to life. There's like these huge salmon returns that those populations, like it's easier for them to go back up the river, and all of this wildlife is just sort of blooming and thriving in the area again. And it's all because of this activism from these Native activists in the area. So anyway, yeah, I really wanted to like tying in the themes of like resilience and of healing. I wanted to draw in some of that. So that's how it ties into Maisie's story.
I love it. Let me see. Gordon. Now, I love your first chapter because I was like, this is present day. I don't know what I'm reading. And it all comes back to a video game. And you use like video game as a conduit to tell part of the story. Can you just tell us how you use that tool to help further along your story?
Well, I mean, the reason why I started with it in war stories is just because it was going to take a while to sort of work up to the battle scenes, but I sort of thought that I could sort of write something that seemed like a battle scene, but in the end reveal that it was actually Trevor playing a video game. And I think that, it's so over the top, right? With the, people jumping on tanks and, just like soldiers going down it just seemed like if it was a real battle, it was certainly the craziest battle, even in a gigantic conflict like World War II. But the whole thing about it is, I mean, again, like I have a couple of boys who are gigantic, sort of video game addicted couch potato slackers, and I sort of, watched over their sort of shoulders at the games they play. And it just seemed like a fantastic opportunity to sort of give a really neat perspective on a version of war that you could have if you got all your information from, video games and movies. One of my favorite words that gamers always use is like respawn. Like if you get killed, it's okay. You lose a life and you just sort of respawn. And of course, that's the one thing that Trevor's great grandfather is just sort of like, yeah, we were just like that, only without the respawning. No respawning in our unit. So I think that that gave me a chance in the very, very first chapter of War Stories to sort of make a statement about video, your sort of video game version of World War II. But at the same time, start in with like a really, really exciting scene with plenty of action in it and a bit of a twist when it turns out to be not what you would initially think it was.
I mean, it was very cinematic. When I read it, I was like, wow, this person's really paying it.
I'll take that as a compliment. That's definitely what I was shooting for.
Donna, Abby, she has a lot going on in this story. And I just my heart goes out to her. She's dealing with anxiety, a brother with a form of cancer that most people don't want to talk about, especially at such a young age. Her best friend leaves or moves away, and then she has all these budding feelings for the new kid next door. What does her story mean to you? And what do you hope readers take away once they read that book, or once they read that book?
Right. Well, one of the reasons that I chose to have the brother have testicular cancer in particular is because that is a type of cancer that does, if it's going to affect people, it usually happens when they're pretty young. So I understand that people feel uncomfortable talking about it. And that's why I wanted to write about that, so that you could talk about it comfortably and easily. And if a young reader does notice something that's different or unusual, then they're not afraid to discuss it or talk about it. And that is just one of the many things that I did in this book, because I think it's important that young people are comfortable enough talking about things like that so that it would get caught early. And when it's caught early, there's, close to 100% chance of success. So I wanted to just push that envelope a little bit. But I think as a writer, I was always told, don't write a quiet story. You shouldn't have a quiet story. And I always feel like, what does that even mean? But what about if it's a quiet person, somebody who's introverted? Because that person's going to have this incredibly rich inner life. Well, how do you translate that on a page and make it super interesting and compelling? So that was my goal and challenge when I did this. So I did it by showing some of her inner life through poetry. So she writes poems to try to make sense of her world, and those poems show up throughout the book. And that's kind of what I wanted to do, to show 33 to 50%, according to research, of the population is introverted. So I wanted to show an introverted character story, because you don't always get that in books, and how that can be compelling and important and interesting. So that was kind of my goal. And then my goal in every book that I write is so that the person reading it feels more understood and less alone in the world. And that's my biggest goal when I write.
I love that goal. Jenny, your book is set in a very different place. What were the challenges of setting your book on Mars, having never been to Mars? You've only probably ever read about it.
That is true. No, it was pretty challenging. I've done a lot of historical fiction. So when I first started writing this, I thought, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake, because, it's the future. I can write anything. But I wanted it to be grounded in very realistic science fiction. And so I started doing a lot of research and talking to NASA scientists and people involved with the Mars program. But mostly instead of focusing in on the scientists who are doing kind of theoretical research on Mars, I really talked to a lot of the engineers who are going to be building the first habitats on Mars. I think some of the most important people to first go to Mars are going to be people who can build habitats, and plumbers and electricians and cooks, people that can get the settlement up and running. And one of the most fascinating things I learned about is just, the reality of living on Mars. I think we see a lot of, feature films and TV series, and they terraform Mars, and they have great big glass bubbles and cities rising in the bubbles. And I don't think that's very realistic in the near term. I mean, practically speaking, it's going to be very dangerous to live on the surface of Mars. And so one thing that a lot of the engineers are saying now is that what's going to be likely or very possible is that we'll live in what are called lava tubes. So beneath the surface of Mars, there are these massive caves that are called lava tubes. It's just where the lava had run, millions of years ago, and they leave by these big caverns. And we have them on Earth too, all over the place. but it makes a kind of a safe space where you can pop in like, like a habitat tent underground, and it protects you from the cold and the radiation, and it becomes kind of like an instant place to live. So that was one of the things I found out from sort of talking to these nuts and bolts people who are like trying to figure out what we're going to do when we get there.
Was there one particular part that was the funnest part to write? Like the most interesting? Was it the tubes?
I think the most interesting thing was writing about, the food, because we can only go to Mars really once every 2 years because of the way that the Earth and Mars orbit the sun. So we're only close enough to each other every 2 years. So we can send supply ships, but the reality is we're going to have to raise our own food on Mars. And so one of the things that they're working on the International Space Station is raising algae. And you can eat algae, spirulina, you can have algae shakes. But I kind of went down the algae rabbit hole and decided that, well, we can use algae for everything in my book. They can, they can have like algae spaghetti, they can have algae shakes, they can have algae toilet paper, because when you take the water out of algae, it becomes paper. They're not going to be able to get shipments of toilet paper from Target, so they're going to have to make their own toilet paper. So that was pretty funny. And so I discovered somebody who's actually making algae toilet paper now. So
that's a fun fact.
The kids love that fact when I showed them that slide. I'm like, it's real.
Well, I'm going to ask a question that I think kids will probably really want to know the answer to. And this is for everyone. What is the weirdest thing that you had to Google? I mean, Jenny, you might have some really interesting ones. The toilet paper. What's the weirdest thing you Googled for your book? Or just an interesting fact that you had to like look up and do some research for? And we'll start with Jenny.
So the other thing is that I wanted there to be cats on Mars because I'm a crazy cat person. I have 2 cats. And it's not just for the fun aspect. I mean, animals have a real history in space. The first test pilots that we sent into space were animals, dogs and monkeys. And I'd never really heard about cats, but I thought somebody had to have sent a cat to space. And it turns out that in the 1960s, the French had a feline space program. They trained 14 cats and they selected one. And this is the cat that went. This is Félicette, a girl cat. And they shot her up in a rocket and they brought her back down and she did not die. She was a tough cat. So this was the first girl cat to successfully go to and from space.
Wow.
Yeah. And nobody knows about her. She's so cute.
She is adorable.
Picture book, Jenny. You got to write a picture book about her.
I know. Everybody says, do the Félicette picture book.
Yeah. Donna, how about you?
Well, the question was so interesting, and I will answer it, but it made me think of some of the unusual things that I just did to research my books. And I was remembering in one of my books, a character gets handcuffed. So my brother-in-law is a police officer, so I asked him if he could handcuff me just so I could feel, and it feels really cold when the metal goes around your arm, so I was able to put that in the book. I wrote a book set in a funeral home, so that meant I took a tour of a funeral home, which was very strange and interesting. And for my previous book, The Paris Project, the character's father is in jail. So in Florida. So I wanted to know what it felt like to go to one of these video visitation centers. You can't visit the person, but you have, visit them with a video screen. And every time I would email to get permission to do that, they'd say, sure, of course, you just need this, or sure, of course, you just need this. And I could never get the this. They never actually granted me the whatever. So my husband and I tried to sneak into a video visitation center, which there's armed guards standing there. So we didn't get very far, but it was enough that I could make up the rest and write about it. So when I tell you the thing that I researched for Abby Tried and True, it's going to sound super boring. She has a red slider turtle. Her turtle's really important. I think it's just sort of, the turtle's introverted just like she is. The turtle's named Fudge as an homage for Judy Blume's Fudge. And I had to look up, what do you feed a red slider turtle? Because I've never had one.
Well, those are a needed item. Gordon, how about you?
So, I mean, I'm actually kind of known, I guess, as like a humor guy. Like most of my books are funny, and that sort of goes through my whole life, right? Like when I was 2 years old, the cartoons on TV that were my favorites were the ones that cracked me up. So writing about World War II, I knew that the the opportunities for comedy were going to be few and far between, and I had to really sort of pick my chances. And I heard a story on D-Day, which is probably the central scene of war stories, that that some of the Higgins boats, right, those landing craft that we use, were actually positioned on the ship that they were launched from in such a way. I'm going to definitely win like the grossest story here, but they were positioned so that they would actually fill up from the vent where the raw sewage came out of the main ship, and so they actually filled up with raw sewage. And I was like, I gotta find out about this because this is really, I think, even for people who experience a major war like the Second World War, D-Day, right? The actual invasion of Normandy, France, Fortress Europe, is got to be the most dangerous, lethal day that most of these soldiers are going to endure. And yet, here are these guys ready for this incredibly risky operation, and suddenly an entire ship empties out its bathrooms, right? It's raw sewage into their ship, and 17-year-old Jacob Firestone, this terrified kid, suddenly gets a fit of the giggles on the Higgins boat on his way to Omaha Beach on D-Day. So I got to go with that one.
You win for that.
You win.
Christine?
So I think that probably the strangest thing I researched was the gooey ducks. So for those of us who are unfamiliar with what a gooey duck is, they are essentially these giant shellfish that only live in the Pacific Northwest. And so they're like some of the rarest creatures in the world. They are also some of the longest living. They can actually you can date them by counting the rings on their shells, kind of like you would with like tree rings, on the inside of a tree. And people have found ones that are like dated like 150 years or so. And they're just like these weird, huge, strange looking shellfish that like burrow into the sand and plant and like can stay there for over 100 years. And anyway, the reason why I was researching them is because Maisie's stepfather Jack, what he does as his profession is he's actually like a gooey duck diver, and there's like this huge market for them, especially between the like native nations of the Pacific Northwest, who have a bunch of like treaty rights with the shellfish and the fish around here. And and so that's what he does, is he goes out in his boat and he like dives into the water and digs these up and then like ships them to Asia mostly, where like in China they're considered like fine dining, and in Japan you would find them in a lot of like their street markets. And it's like probably a very little known fact to a lot of people who go and have like this amazing seafood in these Asian countries, that some of these like they call them king clams there, I think, in China, that they actually come from here, and that it's like these kind of small tribal nations that are out there fishing for them and shipping them to these guys. And so it's like this kind of interesting random little bit of like, I don't know, trade relations and native history and Pacific Northwest ecologies all sort of like in one. And it's also kind of funny because Jack basically has Connor, Maisie's little brother, convinced that he's actually a pirate. And so it's like also this kind of joke, like he's doing this thing that is like totally legit and like this type of fishing that like native folks have been doing forever, but he has this like basically like her 6-year-old brother just thinks that he's a pirate. And that's what he does like out on his boat whenever he goes to work, is pirate things. So yeah.
That's an interesting research fact too. I love that though. I love that small little tidbit about that nation. We're going to take a reader question because I feel that it's important that we answer the questions that the kids are asking. Seja from Jasper High School asks, what is your writing quirk? So think about what your writing quirk is, and Christine, you get to start.
Oh, that's a loaded question. You know, my writing quirk is probably that like I slightly change up my method with every book that I've ever written. Like, I don't know, some people are like really good about creating an outlining and sticking to it. Some people swear by just like pantsing and kind of making it up as they go along. And I am like somewhere kind of in between those two. I think that I just like probably spend just as much time like daydreaming about the book as I do actually writing about it in order to get it right. So yeah, I'll say that that's my quirk, is that I have no method.
It works. Gordon?
I mean, I don't know if it's a quirk exactly, I'm sort of a fidgety guy, so when I start writing like a major scene, particularly a very active scene, in war stories, let's say D-Day or the liberation of Paris or the Battle of Saint Regine, I just have to get up and start doing things. And it's like I'll start like kicking a soccer ball, Nerf soccer ball, because it's inside the house. I remember there are times that I've had like a Nerf hoop up on the wall, and I'm constantly shooting baskets or things. Like I'll just get involved in a real action scene, and I just have to sort of move around. It's like I guess for teachers, it's like that really fidgety seventh grader in your class who just could not sit still in his desk. That's kind of my writing quirk.
I can picture that with a soccer ball. Donna?
My writing quirk is that I have to have a big mug of tea before I can start writing. It activates my brain. So I'm going to show you my favorite mug that I got from my favorite independent bookstore. And it says, go away, I'm reading. And on the other side, it says, books, because it's too peoply outside.
I love that.
I love it. Jenny, how about you?
Oh, my quirk is that I don't start writing first. I start doodling because I'm not really a good outliner. So usually what I do is I kind of just drew a little version of what I do. I just draw what I call a story arc. It's sort of the beginning, the middle, and the end of my story. And then I just start doodling ideas for like a day or two. Like say this was for the Lion of Mars. I draw Leo the cat, and I wanted a character named Belle. I wanted to be on Mars. Did I want there to be a little love? And I'll just draw that for a day or two, and then I'll stick it on the wall next to my desk, because I think we're a lot of us are very visual people, right? And kids, we're growing up in a very visual society. And what I think is that, when we were kids and learning how to drive, we didn't have Google Maps. We actually had paper maps. So we had to look at a paper map to see how we got from this town to that town. And I kind of think of this as like my writing map. So when I get stuck, which I get stuck often, I just kind of look at this and I can kind of see where I'm going, and I'll change it up during it, but it really helps me to like get back on the right road to finishing the book.
Well, I think that's a great visual way to look at it. Let's ask one more question. This one's a good one. This is from Morgan from Pearson Middle School. Wants to know, how did you write your stories without losing your grit? Like when it got tough in the middle, how did you keep that perseverance going? How did you do that? You, Jenny, I'm sorry. I forgot I was doing something.
Probably a lot of eating. I think most authors, we snack an awful lot when we're writing books. Mm-hmm. Or that's one of the curses of working from home. You can just pop down to the kitchen. So,
right.
But no, I think really, I did get stuck. This book took me 3 years to write. And one thing that helped is my children have started to help out a little bit. I have a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old, and I'll get ideas in the most likely times, usually when I was like picking them up from school or running on an errand with them. So I've trained them up to be my secretary. So I'll tell them, I'll say, just write down Leo, Mars, dust. And so then they'll write it and then they'll text it to me. So I'll have all my notes taken by, I'll dictate it to them and then they'll text it to me while we're driving.
That's great.
Donna,
Oh, yes.
how did you keep going when things got tough in the book? Because I know that that can happen at times.
They do. First of all, I like Jenny's idea of snacking. I use that one often. It is a really, really good plan. And my snack of choice is usually like these health food Pop-Tarts that I cannot get enough of. So I write them into my books. I use a lot of tricks and tools because I really do have a hard time, just staying with the same project. And so some of the things I do is I set a timer, and the timer's for 25 minutes. And I tell myself I can write for 25 minutes and then I get a 5-minute break, then 25 minutes and a 5-minute break. I'm like, just hang in there. You can check Facebook or Twitter or whatever for your 5-minute break. So that helps. The timer helps. It's called the Pomodoro method. And I've been using that for years. I also have accountability buddies. So I have people I email and check in with first thing in the morning before I start writing, and we share our goals for the day. And then at the end of the day, we check in and say if we achieve those goals or not. And then I have some critique group buddies that I meet with twice a week. So I feel like they give me artificial deadlines because I need something to read for the meeting. So all those different things help me stay on track.
Gordon?
Well, I don't know if this would work for every book, but for War Stories, it was the research that kind of kept me on track. Because, when you're writing about World War II, you just have to know what you're talking about. And I remember, I had this giant sort of moment when I first Googled it. I obviously had heard of World War II, but I knew a lot about it beforehand. But the first website that I pulled up said, World War II is the largest single event in human history. And I was like, I didn't even know we had a single event, like a largest event. But it sort of sunk in that World War II was so big that everything about it was the biggest of its kind. So like D-Day is the largest invasion. The ships that brought the D-Day invaders from England down to Normandy, France, that's still the largest fleet in human history. And you could sort of play with it even, so the baked beans that the cooks brought to feed the D-Day invaders is the largest amalgamation of baked beans in human history. And I think that every time I sort of felt like I didn't know where to go, or I was sort of written into a corner, I would just go back to the research, and something that I would pick up from there would sort of direct me where the book should go next.
I love that. That's like a little brain break or something to like reignite you in a sense. Yeah. Christine?
So I think that for me, what I've learned is like my best way to get through when I get stuck is to actually just walk away and to make myself stop writing for a little bit. And sometimes that's like a few hours. Sometimes I will seriously, even if I have like, things that I really need to be working on, I'll take a break for a few weeks and I'll just be like, you know what, like my brain needs a break and that's fine. And I'm going to figure it out, but I need to go and like reconnect with the outside world. I need to get away from my desk. I need to like see my friends, my family. Obviously that's been limited in the past year, but I've still found ways to like sort of take breaks, like to read for fun and to just sort of remind myself how much I do love words and how much I do love this work by making myself miss it. And so that's what I do.
Okay. Very good too. We are running out of time, so let's do some lightning round questions. And these are going to be really quick answers, and we're going to go in order from Jenny, Donna, Gordon, and Christine, and we'll just keep going in that order, okay?
Sure.
So let me find, obviously, they're right here. One thing that makes you happy, Jenny, go.
Cats.
Would you say, oh, pass? Donna?
Cats. No, cats.
Cats.
Oh, cats. I was like, I can't hear.
Now, I know I got braces. It's so hard to talk.
Sunshine. Sunshine makes me happy.
Sports. I'm a sports nut.
My daughter. She is 3 months old.
Oh,
Wow.
One thing you're afraid of.
Laundry.
Only one thing. Bills, paying bills.
Oh, is that me?
Yes.
Wow. Well, I don't like laundry or bills, but I think I'm actually going to go with spiders.
Ooh,
Oh,
that's a good
That's what
one.
I was going to say. Another thing I'm scared of. Sudden noises.
Okay, this is going to be easier. Pen, pencil, or marker? Jenny.
Pen.
Pen.
Sharpie.
Pen.
Okay. This one's probably easy, but I might already know Jenny's answer. A chore you hate.
Definitely laundry. And cleaning toilets.
That's right there. I don't like doing the dishes. So my husband and I have a deal that if I cook the dinner, he does the dishes. And if he cooks the dinner, he does the dishes.
Okay, I'm actually going to go with it. I mean, no environmental statement whatsoever. I'm not a big fan of recycling. I like the idea of recycling. I don't like actually recycling.
Fair enough. I love my cat, but I do not like cleaning his litter box.
Oh,
I
That
could have
is
said
like-
that. Yeah.
if you want a cat, where do you put the litter box? That's always the question. Like, who wants to clean it?
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank each of you on behalf of the City of Irving today for joining this panel. It was lovely. Y'all are amazing. You out there, viewers, you were amazing. The North Texas Teen Book Festival, we do this, what we do for you. So just know that this is for you. If you found a book today that you think you might want to dive deeper into, there's a couple of options. You can go to your local library and check it out. But if you want to buy your own copy, we would love for you to go to bookshop.org/NTTBF and purchase the book through there, because we get back part of those proceeds so we can continue to offer this wonderful festival to you. And don't forget to check out our don't forget to check out our swag shop at the NTTBF website. And
Woo!
yay. So thank you, everyone. We're so glad you showed up. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.